Most of our knowledge, we would say, comes within the realm of what we loosely call the world. That means our experience. And our experience comes in a framework of time. So much of our experience happened in the past. And we're experiencing something right now. And no doubt, as time goes on, we'll experience the future. And as soon as I said the future, it's now in the past. That's how rapidly time moves on. Then, if you ask, what is our goal or aim in life? According to Vedanta, it is freedom. And so, what is the freedom? The freedom is the opposite of slavery. And then the next question would be, what do we feel is enslaving us? What is binding us? Now, many of us would think that we are free, that we are not bound. But it is an ideal because everybody in the world wants it and is striving for it. And when they haven't got it, then there is a movement toward it. For example, let us take the women's voter right movements, the suffragette movements. Even here in Dublin, I think comparatively recently, maybe 1920s or something, women were permitted to be educated at university level at Trinity College. Otherwise, they were previously banned. And women were considered inferior. Even in the French Revolution, freedom was not considered to be for women. So these are strange concepts to us today because we emphasize this ideal of freedom. We abhor slavery and we criticize slavery. And yet today, statistically, there are more people under the tyranny of slavery than at any other time in history. You might say it's something to do with the population of the universe or whatever it is, or the world. But the fact is there's more slavery in one form or another. We like freedom of speech. We like freedom of rights and so on. And so when you toss up values, freedom, love, justice, and say these are like balls we can throw in the air, is there a causal factor within it? Does one come from the other? What is the most fundamental? And why should it be like that? Again, we can see what is restricting our freedom the most. Well, knowledge, the opposite of it is ignorance. Ignorance is the main thing which is restricting us. Now, when we say of knowledge, we're not talking about information. We live in an information world, an information age. It seems very important for us. But that is all to do with the external world. And what is wrong with that? Nothing really, except that we don't get our freedom from it. In fact, the external world can be viewed as something like a trap if we don't view it correctly. If we view it correctly, it's a delight. A mansion of mirth is how Sri Ramakrishna describes it. It's not a hell on earth. But we could view it in this way, and it's easy to view it in this way because we're inundated with external information, bombarded probably more than any other age in the history of mankind. The media, we're immediately in touch with it. We're immediately in touch with our cellular phones, immediately in touch with news broadcasts, immediately in touch with internet. We have access to that kind of knowledge. Just it's there at our fingertips. It's there instantaneously. But is it doing us any good? Let's take the mobile phone, for example. It's a wonderful thing. We watch some of these old movies. Somebody's in danger, and we think, why don't they just pick up their mobile phone? But in those days, they didn't have it. They have to go to a call box. And if they don't have that call box, then what to do? So this is very good for Alfred Hitchcock movies. It creates a lot of tension. And of course, in those days, even in my former years, we never had such things. Not even as a telephone, actually. We never used to have a telephone in our house. well, a later development for us. And then the first development or variety of that was a peculiar instrument, with an earpiece up here and so on. And you dialed in on what was called a party line wherever I lived. It was like that. So you can see how rapidly technology has moved on, but has it given us freedom? Or has it bound us much more? Well, it depends how you use it. It can be extremely useful to us, but it also can be a biggest inhibitor of our freedom, where we feel maybe obliged on a mobile phone to take a call immediately, to respond. Nowadays, if you go out of your house without your mobile phone, it's like the emperor going out with no clothes on. We mentioned that story previously. It's like something somehow is missing. It's an essential commodity we feel we have to have. But that's the world we are living in. Now, if you want to be in command of it, if you want to be in control of it, that's something different. Then the instrument becomes useful. And what we call the body and the mind are instruments. That's how we have to classify them. So the mind is an instrument, not only when properly used, it's an instrument for our freedom. When not properly used, it's an instrument for our ignorance, our destruction. It is a fetter. And so we come back to this fundamental principle derived from the Samkhyas, who immediately understood the composition of nature itself, including the mind, threefold nature. And we have to continuously and constantly repeat the principle of these gunas, these binding things, these fetters that are restricting our freedom. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Now, what are the characteristics of Sattva? Well, supposing we feel that there is an injustice being done in the world. Supposing we feel extremely strongly about it. Supposing we are persuaded by the media that the climate is in trouble, that the world economy is in trouble, politics is in trouble, that our way of life is in trouble, that peace is in trouble. It's very easy to see that because the media don't make any money from good news. Mostly we are intrigued by bad news, a kind of intrinsic happiness, if you will, for bad news. It's a bit like some people in some countries who are obsessed by the weather, and the first topic of conversation is the weather, and they're only happy when they're discussing the bad weather. So there is this thing within the human psyche that somehow has a gossiping function. It likes to gossip, and the evidence of that is how many people like to pick up a magazine full of gossip about film stars or pop stars or personalities on the world stage. Other people listen to the news and formulate their opinions. And what has this got to do with freedom? And by freedom, we mean absolute freedom. By freedom, we mean no restrictions whatsoever. True freedom begins with self-control. Without self-control, we cannot have any of this freedom. There are four kind of legs to this table of spiritual life, if you will. One of them would be self-control. Self-control is essential. And by self-control, we mean, assuming that by the self we mean the psychophysical self, the body-mind complex, then we have to control the mind. The mind controls the body. The mind is in charge. So essentially, self-control means control of the mind. That includes the senses. The geography of the mind includes the sense organs. And the senses give us information of the external world, but also gives us a clue because the senses are not independent. When you see the avenues, when you see the kind of gateway or the step-by-step process necessary just for hearing, for example, we can take note of every single step. We can take note, for example, that there is a field that carries waves, invisible field that carries waves, an electromagnetic spectrum that carries waves. We can't see them. We can't get them. We can't put them in a packet and take them home. We know that they are there, but we don't even think about it. All we catch is waves being transmitted. And the waves come very quickly as sound only because our instrumentation is tuned in to certain frequencies, certain wavelengths. You change the frequency, you won't be able to hear anything, but a dog can hear something. There are certain whistles that you can use, a dog will hear it, but the human ear won't catch it. So these are not standard instruments. These are instruments designed for a specific functionality. And the human has these instruments whereby we can observe the process. And we can assume, of course, that there is some intrinsic source, if you like, or some kind of power behind it. When we access this power, we have our freedom, according to our Vedanta. But logically, why should it be so? Because once you have control of anything, you have the power over it. Once you have the power over it, you have the knowledge over it. Knowledge is power. It's very useful Upanishad that asks this overwhelming central question that pupil is asking a teacher, according to the Kena Upanishad. It's saying, I have one central question. It seems to be a very central question. It's based on the understanding that if we know one thing from which everything is molded, if we assume that there is something like a substance and that everything becomes molded from that substance, if we only know that one thing, if we know, for example, the fundamental source of all energy, in chemistry, if we know hydrogen, then really we have an understanding that every other thing on the chemical, over 90 different elements on the chemical periodic table, are simply variations of this, coming from the simplest thing. What is the simplest thing? And yet, simplest does not mean unintelligent. It's a mistake that many neo-atheists of this modern age will make. If there is a God, that God must be the simplest thing because it is the most foundational thing. Complexity comes after, because there can be nothing more complex than the human network called the brain. There can be nothing more complex than the human being. Of all the beans, green beans, baked beans, etc., human beings are the most difficult. It's a complex thing. So the source of it must be very simple. And what we know is that the simplest things are the most unintelligent. They are the dumbest things. Iron, for example, is the dumbest thing. Why? Because you can't get it doesn't do anything. It sits there. It doesn't change into anything. It is the most solid, resistant thing that there is. So a question is being asked. And the question translated comes, it goes Om Kinishtam Dati Prishtam Manaha Kena Pramaha Pratamaha Praiti Yuktaha. It's a conversation between a disciple and a teacher. And the student is asking, by whose will, by whose command is the mind driven? Driven where? Well, our thoughts are all orientated toward our environment, what we call the world. Sent forth by whom? Impelled by whom? Does the mind proceed on its errand? On its errand means it's going somewhere. It's going outward. And the assumption is there must be something that is driving it. What is that, please tell me? Is it an independent entity? No, it cannot be like that. Something must be doing it. And then you can consider that nicely, but then you can also say, how, by whose will? It means something wants to do something. By whose will is the vital life breath that we call prana engaged to take the first breath? At whose wish do we utter the speech even? At whose command does the first breath go first? Speech. What's enabling speech? You may say, I choose what I say. But who arranges the speech? Because it's a highly complex thing. Animals can't do it. Only humans can do it. You might say there was maybe some kind of modification that took place. A gene came in, a special gene came in, what they call the phosph2, a kind of that transformed the capacity of the vocal cords to express themselves. And that requires the formulation of ideas. Without that speech, we can't communicate. I'm speaking to you now. Is it a simple thing? No, it arises from some ideas. Those ideas are quickly formulated, and it comes out as breath, which rushes past some vocal cords that vibrate and come out as a kind of loudspeaker called the mouth. And that's not the end of it. A sensitive thing in a microphone, a filament, is picking it up and transferring it instantaneously, hardly a second in between, so that what you receive on your end is what I'm delivering on mine. Where is it? How is it happening? It's going through the electromagnetic wave system. It's going through as radio waves, if you will. Something like that, and reaching you. It's not a simple process. What is behind it? Now we take all these for granted and don't see them as miraculous things which are very special. And the difficulty is when we take these things for granted, our appreciation diminishes. Our sense of glory diminishes. Our attunement to the glory of the source diminishes. In fact, it's not even there. So therefore, this is a very important question. We take the breath, we take the mind, the thoughts and what have you, and we take then the breath, anything else, by whose will and command does speech come forth, and which is the one who is regulating? That is the Lord, who commands the eye and the ear. You see, this questioner is going from the inside to the outside. We have a physical ear, we have a physical eye, and we know it's also part of the internal organ because, according to the Sankhya's, your whole psyche, your whole internal instrument is the more accurate term. Antakarana, internal instrument. That gives a clarity of what it is. There's no confusion. It's an instrument that we can use. Now, if you fail to use the instrument properly, well, you can't blame the poor instrument. If you take up the violin and it becomes like a screeching noise similar to a cat initially, you can't blame the poor violin. You can't say, stupid violin, please make a better noise. No, you'll have to practice. You'll have to learn how to angle the bow, the fibers which are there, which are so fine, and which are designed to resonate on strings. And the resonation now smooths out depending the angle you use and what notes you play. In other words, how you shorten or lengthen the strings on the violin. All of that takes practice. You can't blame the instrument. The user alone you can blame. And so this is the whole idea, the jakshusha, the ears and the eyes and so on and so forth, and what is behind them. Now, the teacher answers in a very peculiar way. You're not saying directly, it is this. You're saying, it is indeed the ear of the ear. Consider this, beautiful for meditation. In fact, we've just done that. The ear of the ear, it's the mind of the mind. It's the thing which is behind it. It's not an independent thing. It's beautifully put. It is the speech of the speech, the life breath of the life breath. It's the eye of the eye. Because you see, the Sankhya arrangement for the mind is not just a reception faculty, but when you close your eyes, the inner eyes open. When you close your ears, the inner ear opens. It requires some attention, and part of the whole internal instrument will be not only the sense organs internally, but also the various faculties of attention, the faculties of reception, absorption, memory, the faculties of association, the unconscious mind that's digesting your food. All of this comes in with the realm of what is called manasa. Indriyas, manasa. The sense of ownership is there, egoism is there, aham. And more than that, there is an intellect, a buddhi. That intellect, when handled correctly, becomes an enlightening thing for you. I was sitting with a person yesterday, and he said, you see, the problem is the mind. And he takes a bottle, and he says, you see, if that were the mind, we have to take it from here and put it there. I said, who told you that? The problem is not the mind. The problem is how you handle the mind. Because the mind is an instrument of revelation. It is an avenue toward your freedom. But we have to know its nature, and we have to learn to refine it. We refine our thoughts. And every negative thought, which is a blaming thought, a criticizing thought, is so much more binding our freedom because it comes in the realm of egocentricity. It might not seem like that. You might say, I have an idea about justice. Things should be like that and not like this. This person is not a moral person. Implication, I'm a moral person. Okay. It's like somebody saying, I am humble and proud of it. See, it's a contradiction of terms. So, what should we be doing? We should be learning to classify all our thoughts, to push them to the highest purifying position that is possible. It's called sattva. And we should be playing a game like that, promoting sattva. And why would we say that concern for justice and blaming and so on and so forth, criticizing and so on, is not the best attitude? Is because, and why we say that there's egoistic elements of it, is because these things are in contrast to my high moral position. And as soon as you say you have a high moral position, you no longer have knowledge. Now, the Kena Upanishad goes on and tells us this. It talks about knowledge. And so, the eye of the eye, the ear of the ear, speech of the speech, life breath of life breath, the eye of the eye, all of this. And those who really know it, who recognize that there is a source directing the eye, directing the ear, directing mind, directing speech, they have every reason to revalue the world and to say, I can be detached from this, mentally detached from this world. And with that attitude, consistently, they, departing this world eventually, attain immortality, and immortality is freedom. Mortality is binding. The eye cannot reach there, nor can speech, nor can the mind. We do not know it, nor do we know how exactly to teach it, because you can only teach something which is tangible, something that you can't comprehend. How will you teach it? It's indeed different from everything that is known. It doesn't fall in with the realm of what we call ordinary knowledge. And it's beyond the unknown also. How can you describe such a thing? And the teacher is being cautious. He says, in all humility, he says, thus have we heard from the ancient seers who have explained this to us. Now, it sounds like a non-explanation. It's not saying it is this, it is exactly that. No, because it's not the object of our scrutiny. That which cannot be expressed by speech, that by which speech is expressed. Know that as the highest source. The highest source, technically, we call Brahman. Brahman. Brahman, the absolute. And additional is that which is Brahman. It's not that which we normally worship here. What does it mean? Normally we worship in order to get something. We are a kind of bargaining process. We take the highest principle and drag that down, as it were, to a supply principle, some kind of store. I want this, please give me that. This formula is repeated, and we know that in the Upanishads, something that is repeated continuously is extremely important. So that which cannot be comprehended by the mind, but by which the mind is understood. Know that as this Brahman, not that which is normally worshipped here, repeated. That which cannot be seen, that which cannot be heard by the ears, but by which hearing is perceived. That's Brahman, same formula repeated. Not that which is normally worshipped here. Nowadays, it has been fashionable for theists and atheists to debate through this media we've been talking about. And the atheistic argument is, oh, well, this God, where's your evidence? Where's your proof? And the theist has to say, I can't prove it. It's my subjective experience. It changed my life and so on and so forth. That's not convincing. You're trying to deal with something that is beyond the mind, beyond speech, beyond the eyes, beyond the ears, and yet is the source of them. That by which cannot be breathed by breath, but by which breath breathes. Know that as Brahman, not that which is normally worshipped here. And so the first chapter of the Kena Upanishad is very clear in identifying the answer to that question, which originally starts out like this: sent forth by whom, impelled by whom does the mind, and so on and so forth, proceed. A very beautiful answer is given. Now, in terms of knowledge, a beautiful passage comes. You see, if you think, I know it well, you don't understand it. Now, this is echoes from great scientists of the past. Most people will understand that there was a physicist called Richard Feynman, a very clever physicist. And he said, if you think you understood quantum physics, you don't understand it. Nobody understands quantum physics. That is at the most subtle level, beyond the classical view of things, where the eyes operate, the ears operate, the skin operates, and so on. Underneath all of that is a different kind of physics. And because it's more subtle and more foundational, it must actually be more real. We're more tried and tested than any other aspect of physics. How can you have a classical world and a subtle world of mystery there where nobody understands it, nobody knows what it is, and yet it's there, tried and tested, and we're using it right now because I'm using a computer, it runs on it. So how is this possible? We're using things that we don't understand, and yet here it is. If you think, I know it well, you understand it very little. And if you believe you see the form of this Brahman in yourself or in the deities or elements and what have you. Indeed, re-examine what you think you understand. I do not believe I know it well, says the teacher, nor do I believe I don't know it. It's a kind of paradox. And who amongst us understands this, truly understands it? Not the one who believes, I do not know it. So if you believe you cannot perceive it, you perceive it. And if you believe you know it, you don't know it. The untrained person knows it, and the celebrated expert is unknowing. As soon as you puff your chest up and said, I know this, that's evidence that you don't know. This is why the ancient seers were also munis. They were silent ones. How can I express something which is not objective, that doesn't fall under the realm of time and space? You can't classify it. You can't put it in a test tube to see whether it's acid or alkaline. You can't say this is how much quantity it is. You know, when you have these various arguments going on, a very clever answer is given, you know. Very often there is a question, who created God? If there's a God, who created God? And the response is, I don't believe in the God that you don't believe in. It's you know, not that kind of thing. All right. So when it's known in all states of consciousness, in other words, when it is known in waking and dreamless sleep, when it's known, as soon as we drift into sleep, all our knowledge is gone. In a deep sleep, all the knowledge is gone, all memory is gone, all mind is gone, other than a potentiality waiting there, creative potentiality, deep sleep. Even in that state, the person who really knows it still knows it. Knowledge of the self, that is the divine self, is true power. And by this knowledge, we attain immortality. And immortality is freedom. So when we say, in terms of personality development, that there is a mask and we have to be free, it's not that we are free from the mask, it's free to use the mask in a better way. And to understand, with or without the mask, does not affect our freedom. Knowing that I am that one that sits there behind the mask, that is the thing. And then when we examine the characteristics of the mask, which is all different, according to different types, according to different upbringings, according to different carryovers from previous experience, that acts as a kind of base, what we call nurture nature. When we see these different characteristics, these are different kinds of masks which can be used in an expressive way. And the philosophical term for these masks would be upadis. Limiting adjuncts is how it's normally translated. I've said this many times before. And I use the example of a light bulb. You could say a light bulb is restricting, as it were, the great electrical current behind it. And when you switch the white light switch on, you're connecting, making a wired connection between the thing which is the limiting adjunct and the source of it. Source of it is so much vaster. But actually, is that light bulb also not a manifesting adapter? Is it not releasing and radiating the glory of light so that we can see? And so what we call a limiting adjunct, we can look at it from one side. It seems to be limiting our free nature, but on the other side, it's actually manifesting its glory. If one knows it here, it's truth indeed. If one doesn't know it here, it's one's great loss. The wise perceive it in every being, and thus on departing this world, they attain immortality. Don't think that you'll only do it once you, on your deathbed, you say, I recognize now. No, it requires practice because your habit level will exhibit itself even at the hour of your death. The last moment is this last moment, this last second, not the last breath. And so this is a beautiful short Upanishad, very brief one, it was so profound, and goes to the heart of some questions. Who is the real agent in the individual? This question is brought about. And the statement that it must be Brahman is the agent. Without that, none of this works. And then, of course, there's the paradox of inscrutability that we've just described, and also the value. Is there a value in knowing this source? Yes, freedom is the value. Freedom from what? Freedom from difficulty, freedom from pain, freedom from inherent slavery, with all its inherent miseries. They say once Brahman obtained a victory of the deities. A story comes according to the Kena Upanishad. It says these deities became elated at Brahman's victory. They say, or they thought, the victory belongs to us. Now the meaning of the story, of course it's an allegorical story, is to say that when we register ourselves as physical beings and boast, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, it's me who is the agent, then there's a way of knocking that down. But they think that the victory is ours, this glory is ours indeed, and he, having understood their false pride, appears before them, and they didn't know who this spirit was who appears. Now, they ask various deities. You see, fire and radiance is associated with the eyes, with sight, with photons. And we call this fire or Agni. So we also call it the all-possessing one, Jataveda. Please find out who the spirit is, they ask. And so he replies, okay, I'm going to investigate. He rushes to the spirit, and the spirit says, who are you? He says, look, you don't know who I am? I am Agni, I'm fire. And I declare I am Jataveda, the all-possessing one. That's who I am. See the pride. So what is this famous power of yours? Asked the spirit. Well, I can burn the whole of the earth in one go. I can go to Los Angeles and flatten all the palatial mansions. Then, so, well, okay, I'm going to give you a test. Here's a blade of grass. So we burn that. Burn it. Agni rushed to it with all his strength, but he couldn't burn it. So he returned to the other deities and said, I couldn't find out who the spirit is. Deities means all the elements and senses in the body. Indra is king of the Indriyas, that is all the senses. So then they say to Vayu, Vayu is the next in line, the more subtle, because without air you don't get fire. You need the air as well. And the ranking order goes, there is Akasha, there is potential matter, or space, if you will, ether, if you will, a field of energy, if you will, potential energy, if you will. And from that comes kinetic energy, this Vayu. Otherwise, we think of it as wind. And because that is all-pervasive and active, it creates friction. That creates radiation or fire. And from that comes the or water and earth and so on. Anyway, never mind about the most gross elements. We start off with fire. Then we go to Vayu. Well, Vayu find out who the spirit is? Yes, same thing. Okay, let's go and find out. He rushes towards it and the spirit says, who are you? Vayu says, oh, I declare I'm the traveler of all the heavens. I'm Matari Ishwa. That's who I am. Well, what is so great about your power? Well, I can lift everything there is on earth. I can create a hurricane or a whirlwind, you know that. I can destroy everything. And so Brahman, in this form of spirit, puts a blade of grass before Vayu and said, "You can lift it." And of course, the wind or Vayu rushes toward it with all his strength. He couldn't lift it. He returns and he reports to his fellow deities, "No, I couldn't find out who the spirit is." Now, the pride is such they don't admit, "I failed." They just said, "I never found it out. I didn't know it." Now they come to the Lord of all the senses, Indra. Beautiful one is how they describe him, Bhagwan. Find out who the spirit is. Okay, I'll do it. He rushes toward, but the spirit disappears before him. And now here we find in the Upanishads for the first time this Brahman manifesting itself as a deity of feminine form. And this is Uma. So they saw in that space where the spirit was, a golden-hued, beautifully adorned woman. That's Uma, daughter of the Hamavat, the great Himalayas. He asks her, "Who is this spirit?" And so he goes to investigate that spirit, and in the form of this beautiful woman. And so, "Who are you?" And she replies, "It." You see, she replies, not I. She says, "It is Brahman. It's through the victory of Brahman that you have become great." And thus he knew it. It was Brahman. That made him primary among all the deities. And therefore all those other deities, Agni, Vayu, Indra, are as it were above all the other divinities. For they touch this Brahman the nearest. And that is why Indra is, as it were, it's just a story, above all the other divinities. So this is the instruction about Brahman with regard to meditation. It's that which now flashes forth in the lightning and now flashes again. Kena Upanishad is giving us not just a principle, it's giving us a meditation. It's saying that everything that we see leads us back to a conclusion that foundationally it is that supreme principle manifesting itself. And by meditating on these glories, we come to that conclusion. Not just meditating on it, but seeing it in our waking life as people and places and events, in everybody, without judgment or criticism. So that's the instruction about Brahman with regard to the individual self. It's that toward which the mind seems to move, and by it remembers again and again. All our memory comes from it. All our mental activity comes from it. Our breath comes from it. Our heartbeat comes from it. I always remember the struggle that some people have. This divine and God, and whatever you want to call it, I can't relate to. I have no idea what it is. Please help me. All right. Find your pulse. What do you feel? Find my pulse. Good. You're alive, at least that much. Now, where's it coming from? What's causing it? The heartbeat is doing okay. What is pumping the heart? Whatever is pumping the heart, that is called your God. So that Brahman is the indwelling self in every being. And thus it's to be meditated on in this way. And all beings automatically seek him and know this because every being is looking toward the highest ideal, and that process of looking is also the process of unfolding. And here we find way before modern evolutionists, we find evolution. All beings seek him. And the pupil, he then says, "Well, sir, teach me this teaching, this Upanishad." We have to bear in mind, Upanishad, that is sitting near a teacher. And the teacher says, "Well, you've asked me to tell you the Upanishad. And this Upanishad, this teaching, which is delivered by the teacher, I'm telling you. I've just told you. So we have told you the knowledge of this Brahman. And is that enough? Now, how to do it? Well, the legs are there as if it were a table or a beast. The legs on which this knowledge stands are, imagine, we said self-control, yes. Concentration comes before it. Concentration, and as you find a causal range here, concentration causes self-control. And self-control and then sacrifice. Self-control leads to a sense of renunciation and detachment. And the Vedas are its other limbs. In other words, the truths which are discovered. That's the limbs. And then what is its abode? What is its environment? It is truth. Truth doesn't waver, doesn't change. It's not relative. And then it finishes off. He who knows this, these teachings, this Upanishad, and has dispelled all his ignorance, her ignorance, that is the source of your slavery, the main obstacle toward your knowledge and freedom, same thing now, is firmly established in the infinite, unconquerable world of Brahman, yea, even or in the world beyond this life. Beautiful Upanishad is there, Ken Upanishad, and I selected it because it gives us this one overriding, all-embracing question. It says, what is the heart of things? What is the ultimate agent in everything? Where does love come into this? Because that's part of the question. Well, love comes in the purificatory process, because if you have self-control, concentration, self-control, if you have these various things, if you understand the purport of the Vedas, if you have a sacrificing, self-sacrificing attitude, automatically you have a new perception of things. You have a love of what is within everything. And that love is not selfish love. It is generous and all-pervading love. And we can see a description, for example, of those people of steady wisdom who have attained this. We find it in the Bhagavad Gita. And they're working for the welfare of all beings, it's mentioned. There's a myth which says that all these Oriental sages and so on, what do? They're just after their own freedom and own salvation. Not at all. Because when you discover it in yourself, you discover it everywhere, within everything. When Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, he doesn't say why. But there's your why. Your neighbor is yourself. And when you discover that in your own being, you've discovered it everywhere, in everyone. Now then, there's no room for anything else, such as Nrsimha Sharada Devi says, we say it all the time when we eat food. And it starts off, it's not so obvious in the translation we make here. But, see, if you want peace of mind, don't find fault with others, rather find fault with yourself. And then goes on, make the whole world your own. Make every stranger feel at home. Imagine that breadth of love which is there. Not just certain people because you like or dislike them. So this universality of understanding replaces the fetters of our individuality or individual approach. I am this, I am that. Jesus put it like this, since it's Easter, we may have said, you see, when a so-called sinner is brought to him, and he writes the names of those accusers in the sand. Oh, he is who is without sin, cast the first stone, they're going to stone her. And that examination of conscience really made them well, okay, yes, hopefully. Anything short of that would be hypocrisy, isn't it? If we were all perfect, then there'd be no need for all these talks, scriptural studies, spiritual practice, repetition of mantra, two things being required, faith being required, and self-sacrifice being required, these two things. Well, I think we covered the subject a little bit anyway. And it's 7 minutes to go, so we still have some time for more questions. Or if you want clarification on that answer, we can give it. Of course, you know what faith is. I'll finish off with this story. So there's a story of a man who got into trouble. He tripped and fell down a crevasse. And he only had a small thing to hold on to. And he realized he can't hold on to this forever. He cannot climb up. And if he falls to his death. So now we often apply faith out of desperation. So he looks up in desperation and says, Lord, if you're up there, tell me what to do. I have this dilemma. Only you can tell me. And he waits a little bit, and surely, certainly, the clouds roll open and a voice booms forth. He says, my child, here's what you do. Yes, let go. And the man pauses, and he looks up again. Is there anyone else up there? By the way, in this Kena Upanishad, it's the first time we see this Supreme presented in the form of a motherly deity, in the form of Uma, in this case, daughter of the Uma. Well, we leave it there then. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you. That answered the question nicely.
Thank you, Swamiji. Thank you, Swamiji.
Om